The views and opinions expressed by A Little Bit Culty are those of the hosts and don't reflect the official policy or position of the podcast. Any of the, quote, fire content provided by our guests, bloggers, sponsors, or authors are the opinion and are not intended to malign a religion, a group, a club, an organization, business individual, anyone or anything, unless, Sarah?
You're a douchebag.
Yeah. We're not doctors, psychologists, therapists, licensed counselors, or shamans, even though you kind of think you are sometimes.
I'm like an urban shaman. Okay. Good talk. Hey everybody, Sarah Edmondson here.
And I'm Anthony Ames, a.k.a. Nippy, Sarah's husband, and you're listening to
A Little Bit Culty,
a.k.a. ALBC, a podcast about what happens when devotion goes to the dark side.
We've been there and back again. A little about us. True story, we met and fell in love in a cult. And then we woke up and got the hell out of Dodge.
And the whole thing was captured in the HBO docuseries The Vow, now in its second season.
I also wrote about our experience in my memoir, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life.
Look at us, a couple of married podcasters who just happen to have a weekly date night where we interview experts and advocates in things like cult awareness and mind control.
Wait. This does not count toward date night, babe. We got to schedule that. That's separate.
So there's 2 days we got to hang out?
We do this podcast thing because we learned a lot on our exit ramp out of NXIVM. Still on that journey, and we want to pay the lessons forward with the help of other cult survivors and whistleblowers.
We know all too well that culty things happen. It happens to people every day across every walk of life. So join us each week to tackle these culty dynamics, everywhere from online dating to mega churches and multi-level marketing.
This stuff really is everywhere. The cultiverse just keeps on expanding, and so are we. Welcome to Season 5 of A Little Bit Culty, serving cult content and word salads weekly on your favorite podcast platforms. Learn more at alittlebitculty.com.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the wind of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
What up, ALBC listeners? Back with another smash hit remix. Can you believe that people go on hiatus for their shows?
By people, do you mean other podcast shows?
Who are these people?
Clearly not professionals.
I mean,
we did take a break, but the podcast kept going.
define break here, right? Did we not provide content weekly?
We always provide content.
Did we not provide Patreon content weekly?
Always.
I mean, so where's the break exactly?
Well, we did take a little break with the live Zooms with our guests.
That's true.
This
we
summer
did.
because we were on the go, but we're going to pick that up over on Patreon, wrapping up and circling back with all of our amazing guests from Season 5, which happened to be, I want to say like 40 or 50 episodes.
Pretty much.
We're going to come in strong with Season 6.
No days off, Sarah. No days off.
No.
That's what Bill Belichick said after the Patriots won the Super Bowl.
Really?
Yeah.
You
So we're
just
going
bringing
right
in
back
some
to
football?
work. We're going right back to work. No days off.
No days off. Okay, no days off, but we did take a little hiatus, and in that hiatus, we
Hiatus.
created something special for you. We are currently working on a fresh batch of cult-busting brand new episodes with some stellar guests, but we wanted to continue to stir that proverbial pot a little more by revisiting some of our favorite culty topics.
This one's very relevant because Power Force Leah Remini is at it again.
Thank you for creating and deciding to stand up against these bullies.
I'm going to pump her tires a minute.
Pump her
This
tires.
is a woman that put, I think, like all her money into the lawsuits to investigate, I think, what was going on at the police station. She put up like $50,000 of that. And now she's filing another lawsuit. And it's all, I mean, talk about someone who's like, okay, I bet on the wrong horse. That horse is now abusing people. And she's putting her time, energy, and money behind correcting it. Everyone, take a look at this woman.
And people keep coming to us asking us to do more Scientology episodes. So we decided to put this mashup together with some of our best content around this alleged cult, Scientology, aka the brainchild L. Ron Hubbard.
Ugh, my ass is chapped already. You know it, you loathe it, you're right there with me. And maybe you just mock it from afar. But to be fair, unless you're a Scientologist, they think you're pretty silly too. So put that in your pipe.
It's all even, Stevens.
You don't have to smoke it though.
Don't smoke it. We are diving deep into the danger zone in this episode, featuring 3 Top Guns who have taken on the impossible mission of exposing Scientology, which we all know can be risky business.
I see what you're doing there. I see what's going on here.
Okay, enough Tom Cruise puns. Let's introduce a few good men and a super badass woman who you'll hear from on today's show.
First up is the patron saint of cult busting, Leah Remini, whose tires I've pumped previously, and whose book, Troublemaker, chronicles her remarkable journey toward emotional and spiritual freedom from Scientology, both for herself and for her family. Remember, they stalk you.
Next is Mike Rinder. Having spent his youth doing things like, for example, swabbing the decks of L. Ron Hubbard's yacht, Rinder eventually made it to the elite sect of Scientology known as the Sea Org, eventually becoming Scientology's international spokesperson and the head of its Office of Special Affairs. Big red flag. Then he escaped and became a fearless and outspoken ex-member. He's also a friend and somebody we admire more than words can express.
And again, this is someone that was on the front lines, kind of the Marine Corps of the Scientology, flipped the script, and he's doing the work to correct it. So another guy who tires I like to pump as well. And our final one is John Atack. This is one of my kind of stealthy, sleeper episodes. It was in our early days, and I loved our conversation with him. He's one of the only court-appointed expert witnesses on Scientology. In his book, Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, about the early history of the church, is cited by academics all over the world. John was a public Scientologist for 9 years, trained as a counselor, and even did the secret OT levels, but ditched it when he discovered appalling aggressive behaviors towards members. In addition to his work podcasting as a Scientology mythbuster and using his Instagram account to help educate people on overcoming things like manipulation, destructive cults, and abusive relationships, he's written several novels, including Voodoo Child, slight return, inspired by the life and downfall of Jimi Hendrix.
So without further ado, please enjoy this Scientology Sucks, Sorry Not Sorry, a Little Bit Culty medley.
If you don't, there's going to be Days of Thunder ahead of you. Like that? Huh?
Yep.
Like you said, the church determined your morality and they're making you numb to certain things. That started at what age for you?
Well, my mother got in when I was, I think, 9 or 10, and the communication courses started then. We weren't going into Scientology at this point because we lived in, a different city. We couldn't travel to where the Scientology was. But when we got older, she started forcing us to get on a train to go there. But I remember my mother getting into Scientology, I think I was about 8 or 9.
Do you remember a self before that? Before you started taking, how you thought and felt about things at an early age and then how that may have been compromised?
I was young, and I just remember growing up like a typical child, but feeling disenfranchised because, my dad was there, but I don't remember him being there. He was, Catholic. My mother was Jewish, but my mother wasn't really raised in any religion because her parents died when she was very young. But my grandmother was very Catholic, and I remember going to church with my grandma and feeling safe. She used to do the cross on my head at night, and she made me feel like a child being protected. And I remember the difference between my grandmother, who treated me and my sister like children, and my mother, who was talking to me like I was an adult. And I saw a change where my mother was she gave us these little booklets, and it had basic morals, don't steal and don't do. And I was like, well, that's. But that's what I was doing. I was stealing. Right. You know what I mean? I was like, that's what we do here. We steal leg warmers and we steal Smurfs. That's what we do. We go to the stationery store and we steal things. But then she started telling me, I want you to tell me when you do bad things. And I kind of like that because my friends were rebelling against their parents and doing things. And I was the good, bad girl. I would stick up for people, but I wasn't really the cutter of classes. You know what I mean? I really wouldn't do that.
Got it.
But, the smoking and the smoking pot, I was like, no, I can't. If I smoke pot, my mother's going to be very mad at me. Yeah. I did see a difference, Nippy, which was weird because my mother was not hitting us, whereas my friends' parents were hitting them growing up. And my mother was becoming this more communicator which wasn't usual for our neighborhood.
We
For
have
sure.
to be super careful when people do this with us too. Like, but you got good out of it, and and trying to find the silver linings, which for us is a really big fine line. I'm sure it is for you too. Like, of course, and we talked about this when I did your podcast. Like, I've had to go like, okay, what was good from it so that I don't waste 12 years, but I
Sure.
have to make sure that those good things were not from Keith. I have to find their
Correct.
original source. So there was something good for you that your mom didn't hit you. That's not from Scientology.
And that's what I've been doing too. And what's funny is, even for the good parents who weren't raised in Scientology or cults or coming from abuse themselves, I'm reading parenting books now. And I'm sending it to my mother. My mother's like, what the fuck you sending me? I'm too old. You're grown. I don't need to be a better parent to you. And, it's interesting because I'm like, I couldn't even imagine, like, I never saw this parents, in myself or in my mother. And I was like, this is the way you're supposed to parent? I had no idea.
What's that like for you now? Like
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because, I go, God, I hope I didn't fuck her up too bad so far. I hope I could, reverse some of the damage.
What does she think of what you're doing now? Like, is she aware? Is she proud of you? What's the dynamic?
Yeah, I think my daughter thinks that I'm tough. I think she's proud of me. I think when I first left, she heard me on the phone and she was, 10. She heard me screaming and crying on the phone with somebody. And she came into the room and she said, Mom, you've left, she said psychology because she didn't know the word Scientology. She goes, you left Scientology here. And she had her finger on my forehead. And then she said, but you have to leave it here and then touch my heart.
Oh,
Wow.
I know.
I'm going to cry. Oh my God.
Wow.
That's exactly what happened, Sarah. I started crying.
Wow.
Oh my God.
And she's right. But what we're talking about earlier, what I was talking about, Scientology being your primary caretaker, I left my parents. They raised me. Scientology raised me. It's always shocking to my friends when I say I'm heartbroken over what they're doing. I'm heartbroken over what they're saying. I'm heartbroken by what they're doing to people who they know are telling the truth. And the response is usually, why are you shocked, Leah? Why would you be shocked? Why would you be heartbroken? And I'm like, because it's still somebody that raised me. It's still hard to see when they know they're doing the wrong thing. It's still close to my heart. It's a weird, it's weird. It's still something that I struggle with. It's like a parent abusing you. You still love that parent, even though they're awful and doing bad things.
I totally feel that. I feel that pain, like watching you in some of your interviews, like I cry deeply with you. And I don't know if you haven't been through something like this, if people get that, in the same way, but I definitely feel like, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious, do you ever bump into anybody and have like awkward moments?
Yeah, and I use this analogy because I don't know. Are you familiar with the pimp
Sort
world?
of. Yeah.
Like if you belong, I'm well versed in the pimp world. But if you belong to another pimp, and a pimp is driving by, you have to turn your back to that pimp to let them know, like you're with
Right.
somebody else. On a funny level, that's what happens. Like if I see them as like friends of mine that were the former godparents to my daughter, or I was the former godparent to their child. And friends of mine for 35 years literally turned their back to me. And it's heartbreaking. That's the funny part, that pimp references just to be funny, but it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see my goddaughter who lives in my neighborhood because I'm the one who suggested that she live in my neighborhood so that I could take her when her mother had to work and to be in a certain school district. I wanted my goddaughter to be in a good school district and to see her, growing up, and I can't run to her. When I'm getting coffee in the morning at my local coffee shop, or I'm driving by and I see them walking, going on a hike, it kills me. It's they literally feel they can't talk to me. I consider my friends family, and people who know me know that. Like I don't.
You're loyal.
I have these big ideas, movie ideas, movie moments that they would leave Scientology and I would be vindicated, And in the movie, I'm like, yeah. So how does it feel now? But I know that that's not me. I know I would crumble and accept them and do
Right.
anything for them if they left. I wish I was the person who said, "No, fuck you, bitch."
No, you'd welcome
Yeah,
them back
fuck
with
you.
open arms.
Yeah,
Yes.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way of
Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
person that's still in.
It's just not in my nature to to turn you away. And again, somebody that I considered family, these are people that I considered family. So, it's hard. I look through all my pictures a lot because I'm in constant need to organize pictures for my daughter who could give a shit. But
I
look,
told
have
you, we're the
everything.
same person.
Sarah, like
Yeah.
I
No.
showed her the other day, I have every dress. I have every dress of this kid's, first 5 birthdays in NASA, fucking sealed dresses from every birthday. I print photos out and I label, first birthday, second birthday, third birthday, first time you ate, first time you said something cute, first, everything's organized. So I'm looking through all these photos and I'm like, all of my memories are wrapped up in Scientology.
That's hard.
And Scientologists,
It's really hard.
yeah. Well, you got married when you
Yeah.
guys were in, right? You had your babies it's just so many memories are wrapped up in such an awful time of
Yeah.
your life.
Is there anything that you look back on and miss elements? Is it just friendship? Is there anything else that feels like you wish you could just extract that? Or
No, it's we felt that we were part of something bigger than ourselves, right? We thought we were not just actors anymore. Look at us. We're saving mankind. We have purpose. We have a mission, the sense of community. Now we have to not look at this time and our energies as wasted, but finding the purpose in the pain.
we tell our stories. We change the world. A Little Bit Culty is proud to support the hashtag I Got Out project, which empowers survivors of cultic abuse to share their stories online as a catalyst for education, prevention, and healing. Learn more about the hashtag I Got Out movement and find resources at igotout.org.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family, but everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
What gets pounded into you in organizations like Scientology or NXIVM or the Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever is, if you are out of step with the rest of the gang, it's on you. There's something wrong with you. It's not something wrong with the organization or the teachings or the principles. It's you. And that is a very, very powerful control mechanism over people. Extraordinarily powerful. And, you know, the big realization that people have when they leave and they start talking to others who have been through similar experiences is, yeah, actually, it wasn't just me. Yeah, there is actually something wrong. Yes, you know, it's not what did I do to pull it in. It's what the fuck are they doing to cause people this harm. And I think that's the other thing that the Aftermath Foundation provides is linking up to people who have similar experiences to be able to start peeling away the onion of nutty think that you get ingrained with. And, you know, we even help people, if need be, to go to a therapist who has experience in dealing with cults. Because That's another thing that we have found is general therapy doesn't hack it.
No, they don't know what they're looking at.
Exactly.
And they also tend to ask questions that can be triggering if they don't have the cult training.
Exactly. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
It does. And it's just something that we really want to do too. And I don't know if it's something we can join you with or just learn from or something, but we can save that for another day to talk about. But I really I feel the need for it. Not just for NXIVM, but just so many people reaching out to us from so many different places that I'm like, I don't know where to send you. And we have some resources, but like, I want to help, like you, I want to help. And I don't feel like I can, other than sending them a list of resources, I feel kind of tied.
Well, also, we're raising 2 kids.
Nippy, I totally understand it. I wanted to say to Sarah, look, I understand that dilemma. I understand a lot of people reaching out to you. Please, you are doing an enormous amount already. Don't be burdened by the fact that you don't have the ability to devote your attention to every single person who reaches out. Look, I went through this for a long time, and I finally reached the conclusion there is only so much that I can do. I can't answer everybody who sends me an email or a DM on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and fully satisfy everything that they need. This podcast is an enormous resource for people. And your book is an enormous resource for people. And my book is a resource. And the Aftermath show is a resource. And we've got to devote our time and effort, in my view, to doing things that are able to have an impact on more than one person. Because if we focus on every individual, we never get anywhere. And you feel bad. You don't feel bad about it. Please don't.
The philosophy I've tried to adopt is just dominate what's in front of you. If you can take care of what's in front of you, it expands your sphere a little bit. But I also can't help but think of that scene in Schindler's List with Liam Neeson at the end. It's one of my favorite scenes in any movie where he starts to recognize he had a gold pin on his uniform that could have saved 20 lives. And so there's that impulse, Sarah, tell me if you can't relate, when someone reaches out, while you have your kid, you're torn with okay, I got my kid and I got one person. That's a good way to look at it, is you have to double down on what's reaching more people, I think. You were talking during the resources and helping people about people that leave Scientology. And it got me thinking, after reading your book and everything that's going on in the media right now, when does Scientology get more sensitive to its attrition? They must know that people are leaving. They must know that the public perception of them isn't favorable. There's always a point where something crashes, right? Where they can't sustain kicking people out because they need members or something like that. Where is it in that process, and what do you see them doing to combat it? And it's just bizarre to me how it's keeps losing people but not thriving.
Right. Well, let me answer as best I can, Nippy. They are already extremely sensitive to the loss of public relations stature and the loss of membership and new people coming in. Unfortunately, a part of the problem is that even though they are undergoing pretty serious attrition, the information age and the internet in particular information is poison to cults. It is what ultimately kills them. And, these days you go Google Scientology or Google NXIVM, the same thing. It's just a world of shit. There's nothing good there.
It's not doing well.
Everybody knows it. But Scientology, sort of like those people that are left in NXIVM, when the world starts caving in to a hardcore cultist, that means we have to redouble our efforts. We become more hardcore because this is proof in our eyes that the world needs saving even more, because look at all the bad stuff that's out there trying to stop us from saving everybody, all the ignorant, unwashed fools out there that don't know about Scientology or who are against Scientology. They all need to be saved, and they are currently winning, so we need to fight harder. We need to give more money. We need to be more dedicated. I mean, it's like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the end of the world is going to be on October 4th, 1973, and October 5th, they're all running around going, see, we were just tested by God. And so we got to redouble our efforts to save everybody because, 1997 is coming and that's the next date. And then when that goes by, the inner core, the hardcore fundamentalists get more convinced that no matter what happens, no matter how bad it is, there is attrition. Like every incident, there is some attrition, but it also kind of hardens the inner core. And in my view, the way that Scientology will finally be undone is the undoing of the tax-exempt status. And not because of the money, but because of the transparency that it brings. It will force, or it would force, Scientology to have to provide reports about how much money they get and what do they spend it on. And if the world knew how much money Scientology gets and what they spend it on, including, rafts of lawyers and private investigators and harassing, websites, et cetera, they would be outraged. But Scientologists would also be outraged, because they are told, give us $100,000 or $1 million or $50 or whatever it is, and we are going to provide, housing for the underprivileged in dark Africa, some nation in Africa, and we're going to open schools and provide educational materials. And they would find out that that's bullshit. That the things that are done are just PR opportunities with a video crew there staging shit to show them and pretending that they're spending their money on it, and they're not. And that, to me, would be what will undo Scientology entirely.
So what needs to happen for that to happen? Like, what's the next step?
Well, the IRS needs to review their tax-exempt status and hopefully find that they are in violation of public policy. It shouldn't be hard because, I've talked about this a lot and there's stuff on my blog about it. Public policy is an issue that needs some clarification in the world of tax exemption. But nevertheless, the way that will happen is if there is pressure put on the IRS, and that pressure is either going to come from Congress or from big media. And by that, I mean like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, demanding that something be done about this, or people on the House Ways and Means Committee, or some other senior sort of political people start demanding that the IRS take a look at this and review the exempt status of Scientology. When that happens, it'll be easy for the IRS, but the momentum of getting that sort of, iceberg shifted in a different direction is hard to accomplish.
But it just seems like they're so on everyone's ass. Like, wouldn't that be such an obvious win for them to release all this money? I don't know.
Well, here's the issue, Sarah. There is a lot of law that has been created in the last 100 or 200 years surrounding the constitutional rights of religious organizations under the First Amendment. And unfortunately, in the United States, the legal system is weighted with a bag of gold on one of the scales, and he who has the most money has the scales tipped most in his favor. And almost all law that has been created with respect to the rights of religious organizations protect the rights of the organization and not the rights of the individual. Because typically it's individuals that sue the organization for the harm that is being caused to them. Typically, the organizations bring in hundreds of lawyers and the little guy is left sort of holding the bag. And that has created a body of law which is precedential and which is very hard to overcome. And, I've said many times that Keith Raniere's biggest mistake was not turning himself into a religious organization. And he very well could have, he stole enough from Scientology. He could have just walked in and said, hey, you gave Scientology exempt status. We're no different. We got all our shit just like they have. So that is a big part of the problem.
Hey there, listener. Hope you're enjoying this episode and that you're remembering to hydrate, stretch, and unclench your jaws. Sometimes listening to conversations about heavy topics can really make you tighten up, And remember, a Little Bit Culty loves you. Also, come hang out with us on Patreon after you finish this episode. It's fun over there. Fun is good. And now, here's a brief message from our sponsors.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
It's one of the things we really want to grill you about today. And I know you talk a lot about this, and you have so many papers you've written and interviews you've already done. We're really trying to take your wealth of knowledge and figure out what can we distill and share with our audience, most of whom are recovering members of different groups.
Most of them, you think?
Well, just at least the people that we engage with on social media.
Yeah.
Then there's a lot of people who are just fascinated by this topic, cults and abusive stuff in general, and people who want to understand it so it doesn't happen to them.
And there's also the component of all these things that go on are proprietary to cults and all that stuff. So the behaviors and abuses, I mean, we say this almost every episode, aren't proprietary to cults, and we want to draw the parallels between, I mean, look out into the world. You know,
Yes.
I was talking with Sarah last night. It's like, I'd love to hear John just go off and through history, current, and maybe future of all these people that have these human predatory traits and draw the parallels so that people can kind of get out of this bubble of thinking that they're alone in this cult con or whatever and recognize that we're all susceptible and vulnerable to it. Right.
I think the reality is that the vast majority of humanity are caught up in cultic behaviors. It's the other way around. Perhaps 1 person in 10 isn't. Margaret Singer wrote Cults in Our Midst. She said to me, and it's called Cults in Our Midst because the society we live in is a group of interlocking cults. I take that point of view too.
Yes. And I know that's what Opening Our Minds really looks at, is looking at all the overlap between authoritarian cults, MLMs, groomers, terrorists, radicalizers, pimps, abusers. It's everywhere. But before we get into that, and you've such a wealth of information and I really want to get into it all, but I also want to introduce our audience to you if they're not familiar with your work. And those who have been in this space, in this field for a while will already know you because of your prolific body of work.
It's hard to ignore me.
It's hard to ignore you. But for those who are new to the scene and who are just learning about this whole world, like, after the vow or after NXIVM was exposed, can you give our listeners like the short version? Because as you know, we ask all of our survivors of different groups, how did you get in? What was the hook? How did you get out? And how are you healing? With yours, with Scientology, from the interviews I've seen you do, you weren't one of the people who got abused and went and saw a bunch of the bad shit. You left for different reasons. But could you give our listeners just the cliff notes of what you were looking for when you joined as a teenager into Scientology?
I was looking for emotional equilibrium. It's that simple. That I'd come home. I'd been off in Toulouse in France for 6 weeks, where I was meant to have some gigs. I was a professional drummer, and I'd arrived there and found I'd been conned and got stranded. And when I got home, the girl I'd been living with for 15 months had disappeared. It took me 4 days to find her. And ultimately, I found that she'd been shacking up with a friend of ours and she was on her way off to New Zealand. And I got a little bit upset.
Rightfully so.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I talked to, I knew, I had a friend who was a psychiatrist who basically said, I can't talk to you, you're over 18, which wasn't very helpful. I went to my doctor who said, I don't know anything about this. And I talked to an Anglican priest, and one day I was at a friend's house, and there's this book called Science of Survival by Hubbard, which was actually written by Richard DeMille, the adopted son of Cecil B. DeMille, but put out under Hubbard's name. And that's why it's so much better written than any of the other stuff in Scientology. And it was a really persuasive argument about therapy. It didn't get into all of the past lives and the little stuck spirits all over you and all of this supernatural powers. I was desperate. So I actually asked around, and nobody seemed to have heard about the scathing government report on Scientology that had only been published 3 years before. Nobody seemed to know anything. So I went in, and there were these lovely people. They were all university graduates in creative things, and they were really friendly, and they really believed in it. They weren't trying to scam anybody. And so I just became immersed in it. And I was just really lucky that I never became a live-in member. I stayed out in the outside world, so I could switch languages and talk to Scientologists in their bizarre and elaborate loaded language. I mean, there are 2 600-page dictionaries of Hubbard's speak, where he redefines words and makes words up, all of this stuff. And I had 9 years where I did 25 of the then 27 available levels of the Scientology bridge. So I was clear, and I was an operating Thetan level 5. And you've got the other side of this, and you daren't tell anybody that it doesn't actually work. You don't have any supernatural powers. It's like the Wizard of Oz, basically. And you can't say anything about that. So you have to keep pretending. This guy, David Miscavige, came along, and various other bully boys. I was ordered to stop talking to one of my friends, who'd worked very closely with Hubbard. I think I can say this now. The friend was Ira Chaleff, who's quite rightly famous for his work on courageous followership and intelligent disobedience. Brilliant man. And I was told I couldn't talk to him. And I said, I talk to whoever I want to. And I spent 6 months trying to get them to admit they'd made a mistake throwing Ira out and calling him a suppressive person, a term that travelled into NXIVM, of course. Then I just went, I'm leaving. And I found myself at the middle of this swirling, about half the members left between 82 and 84. And I was at the centre in the UK. About 3 months in, I got all this material about Hubbard and went, he was a liar. He was a cheat. He says, honesty is sanity. He says, the road to truth must be trod with true steps. And yet he contradicts himself. So From there, I became a hub for people who were leaving. I helped independent Scientologists, even though I didn't believe. And Russell Miller came along to me, who was the Sunday Times in London, and signed me up to be the researcher for his great biography of Hubbard, Barefaced Messiah. What a wonderful title that is. And he's an esteemed biographer, Arthur Conan Doyle, Getty, Hefner. He wrote lots of biographies. And he took the manuscript that I couldn't get published, which would later become Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, and took the bits he wanted. And we spent a year and a half interviewing more people, finding out more things, and he published his book. Then I got a deal for my book, which sadly initially didn't sell very well because his book had come out first. But it did become a bestseller in the end on Amazon. Sadly, the publisher then went bankrupt and didn't pay the royalties. But
oh, no. Such a great title. Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky.
Direct quotation from Ron Hubbard. When he opened his first foundation in April 1950, he turned to the guy next to him, who I interviewed extensively, and he said, let's sell these people a piece of blue sky, meaning let's sell them bullshit memberships like the Sashas in NXIVM. Let's make them feel they have an elevated status. And I spent a dozen years doing that. They harassed me to death through that dozen years. And then for 4 years beyond, I was sued in the US. I was sued here. I think there were about 10 court cases in all. I made precedents all over the world. For example, Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky. There are only 2 books that have been stopped from publication in the whole history of the United States. The other one was Victor Marchetti's book about the CIA. So Scientology managed to convince a judge to stop publication, presumably because of national security interests at heart here. And we got that overturned. And I had the same lawyer as Marchetti, Mel Wolfe, which was bizarre coincidence almost. And he was brilliant. He did a great job.
This podcast is brought to you by Citizens of Sound, a podcast production agency committed to developing and launching shows with gravity and depth. From conception to launch, Citizens will partner with you every step of the way, whether you're an actor, business owner, doctor, fitness coach, hairstylist, or influencer. Connection is the future of communication. Jump on board with Citizens of Sound today and start your show. Go to citizensofsound.com and follow them on Instagram. And trust me, it'll be a really good decision for you.
Hope you liked this A Little Bit Culty Rewind episode, which has been ethically recalibrated and artfully remixed, especially for high temperatures and slow, lazy summer days.
And if you still like Scientology, your eyes are wide shut.
It's so good.
See you next time.
We'll be back soon with all new episodes. And in the meantime, you can always find us over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/alittlebitculty. Dropping brand new episodes every week, special packages with signed books and ALBC merch and lip balm and stickers and treats from our sponsors and a little gift bag if you join the inner circle, wink, wink. Yes, we're being kind of sardonic with that, with all the names. Fanatic, Loyalist, Flying Monkey, Inner Circle. Those are jokes, just so you know. You're not really joining our inner circle. That would be culty.
It would be, Sarah.
You can also always leave us a voicemail at alittlebitculty.com to give us some feedback. We love feedback, even shitty feedback. It fuels us. Or troll us on Instagram at A Little Bit Culty. Don't troll us. Just kidding.
Don't encourage that behavior.
Just kidding. Don't troll us because we're empaths. We take things personally. Until next time, don't swim in a full stomach. Don't forget to call your mom and don't join a cult.
I like those. Bye.
Bye.
Magnolia.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Hope you liked this episode. Let's keep the conversation going and come hang out with us on Patreon, where we keep the tape rolling each week with special episodes just for Patreon subscribers and where we get deep into the weeds of unpacking every episode of The Vow.
And if you're looking for our show notes or some sweet, sweet swag or official ALBC podcast merch or a list of our most recommended cult recovery resources, visit our website at alittlebitculty.com.
And for more background on what brought us here, check out Sarah's page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred. True story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, narrated by my wife, and at most bookstores.
A Little Bit Culty is a Talkhouse podcast and a Trace 120 production. We're executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, with writing, research, and additional production support by senior producer Jess Tardy. We're edited, mixed, and mastered by our rocking producer Will Rutherford of Citizens of Sound, and our amazing theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant and co-written by Nigel Asselin. Thank you for listening.